Welcome back to Just Blazor Programming. Today we have State Management Part 2. So I don't normally like to do this, but yes, you will need to watch a video that I did before about state management over here if you want this to make sense and you don't have the prerequisite knowledge of state management. So what we'll be discussing today is how to use state management in other parts of your code. So let's say you have information on one part of the code and you want to use it in other parts or want to access it in other parts, and that's what we'll be doing today. So why is this important to use, or why is it good to consider this for your web applications? Well, the simple reason being is that you can make less API calls and make your application a lot more efficient, and it's a lot more performant when it comes to the user experience. The reason being is because instead of making more API calls in order to get data, if you already have data in one place, then you could, if you design your web application good enough, will be able to grab that data from that one place and then stick it wherever it is you got to stick it in. But there is a caveat when you do this, and that is the fact that now you have to design for it, because you have to take into consideration data coming from a third party. So that is a different topic on its own, but in this one I'm just going to teach you how to actually do that in Blazor. And basically, if you are able to design it well, because it's really easy to screw up on it, and it makes your programming it makes your program much worse. But if you do it right, you can actually have a far more efficient program than if you didn't have any state management, or at least have state management in places where you know you are going to be grabbing that data over and over again, so that you could save yourself some API costs, save yourself some performance issues down the road. But again, if you want to go on down this route, there are some architectural considerations when you do that, and it's best if you plan it from the beginning that you are going to do that. So there are pros and cons, but this is how React does it. This is how Angular does it when it comes to using state. This is one of the features of it, is that they have unidirectional flow of data. So with the explanation out of the way, let's get into the actual tutorial and clickety-clack our way into this state management business. So when it comes to state management in Blazor, there are a couple of things you have to consider. The first thing is that this does take advantage of the actual lifecycle component methods that exist for Blazor components. That is the one method that we really care about, is going to be the state has changed method, and you're going to see an actual live use of how this works, because when we make a change to one place, it doesn't necessarily trigger in the other place there where we want to see the change. So we want to kind of keep things in sync. So that is the whole reason why you even have that lifecycle method, because that allows you to trigger the re-rendering of other components if you need to. But I'll show you all that once we get into the code. So right now, I have my profile state object. So yes, this is the actual same project that I did last time. And if you have not seen that, I would recommend you to, because I am not going to redo this again. So yeah, so the first thing we're going to have is the profile state class that we created. So this is actually the class that we have our state. We're actually calling for the state management. And we have our form state, which is what where the example was. We just created a form, we attached a state to it, and then it kept track of whatever our changes were, so that whenever we moved out of the browser, we were able to not lose the change that we've done. And then our nav menu. So the nav menu is just going to be for show, basically. And what I want you guys to do in this first is we need to import both the directory for the state objects that has our class for profile state, and then we're going to inject the profile state in there. So you'll see what I mean now. This is essentially what I want to do. Blazor state, what was this thing? Blazor apps. Blazor app state proj, that state objects. And then we're going to inject our profile form state in there for profile state. So actually, no, it's not called form state. Profile state, perfect. So in this case, yeah, I just copy pasted from the other thing I had, sorry. So yeah, what we want is the directory that has our state objects, and we want to get our profile state injected into this, because that's how we're going to check to make sure that we've actually are able to both see the changes that we bound to the page from the other form state page. In order to see all that, we need to create another div here, right under this one. And basically, I was going to copy paste this thing up here, but So it's basically the same class that we're going to use that has been used in these other nav links. Except we're going to add the style of background white because it was hard to see. So just do that so you can actually see what's going to be written. And then what I want to translate here is actually the first name. So we're actually going to show you what happens when I try to get the first name from this class here. Just make sure that yeah, okay, so we're good. Don't if you're actually calling objects and stuff, make sure you put that at sign. Now we're gonna test it out. So here's our first name. This is our change. We're gonna do a small test. What was gonna happen? Nothing, exactly. So I just wanted, oh look, it did update. It updated only after we did render it. But we want to update it either on an event or we want to update it using the actual state handlers. So yes, even though you have tied the events together, it's only going to update when you start to re-render other things, but we want to be able to control that, which is what we're doing. So this is so you have already access to the state by doing this and the actual data. The problem is actually updating it, and that's what we're going to fix now. I was only surprised because I forgot that, yeah, it will re-render it again. You just have to trigger it by going through the actual components and stuff. So in order to do all of that, we need to go to our actual profile state class and write a few things in here. The first thing we want to write is the actual event handler. That will be the thing that's going to trigger the state change. So handler. So we're going to have this handler up here. This will be the thing that's we're gonna be using to invoke the events once we do what I'm gonna show you to do, which is to click a button and trigger everything again. But we're gonna need a few more functions in order for us to actually do that. So we need something that actually triggers this event. So we're gonna create a function. Copy that here. I didn't do the tab thing, unfortunately, but we could just write that in. Take the invoke. This event args.empty. We're not gonna really like pass in any data through this. All we're really gonna do is just say that an event was triggered. That's really all we care about right now. And then we're gonna create two functions. One is to get the actual first name. So we're gonna create a constant for this, or not a constant, but like a private string variable. Gonna be separate from these two. That'll be our current first name. Right string. String current first name. Perfect state handler. All right. So now we're gonna create our getter function here. At first. And we're gonna return the very same current first name. And now we need the actual setter. And the reason why we do this is because we're gonna be passing in these very functions in order to ensure that the data gets triggered and all that good stuff. So you'll see what I mean once I start doing that. So if you don't mind, I'm just gonna copy paste this. We have the current first name is equal to, yes, I need to write the actual parameter. So when we set the first name, we're passing in some string. The string will set the current first name, and then that will actually trigger the state has changed function, which actually will inside of it trigger a handler to say an event has been triggered, basically, which is what we want. So that'll be it for this side. And now we need to make some changes on this side. So what you saw there when I actually made the change and you saw how change happened on the actual first name in the nav menu, that was only because I moved between like the renders of other components, but I don't want that. I want to be able to control that within my component, and we're gonna do that through this button here. So even though I said this button was for show, it was not. Haha. You see how it all comes together? This was not just a happy coincidence. I promise you. I promise you. So we're gonna have this on click here, and we're gonna create our own function for the to actually change this. But before we do that, let us make I don't want to use the first name last name within the profile state because I think that might be a little too confusing. So I'm just gonna keep it all local more or less. So public string first to string. So we're gonna replace this bind value to this instead. You could keep this there, but this is just to show you that I have made these changes and they are not being caused by anything we've done before. So that's kind of why I want to do this separation. So that in mind, we would not have to create this method. Public void first name change. That's part of the reason why I look over is just to make sure that I'm not blocking anything. And that this is actually in the center of the screen. Apart from me cheating. So, profile state. So we want to get the set first name function. Take this. And we will take the first name is equal to whatever. Get first name. I don't think you have to really do this step, but if let's say I had like an initializer or whatever, or if I had other data doing some specific things, I would probably want to set the first name to this. So this is probably good practice. Just not in this case. Probably don't need to do it. This is just something that you probably would want to think about when you're creating an actual component that actually gets data. Is to have that get first name somewhere, either in the get either in the initialize lifestyle life component. So it's just a consideration, but we could do this here because I don't see a reason why to do it in the other place either. So good. So what we have done is simply bind the button to this first name change function. That first name change will set it to this function within our profile state class that will set the first name to our private string here, and it will have a state has changed, and then we get the first name that it was changed to, and then that sets it. Even though even though here the first name is bound, we still need to pass it into the profile state so that we could show this to whatever else wants to look at this data, or whatever else has the state management injected into it, as you can see here. So that's what we were going to do. And instead of first name, we're going to replace this with get the first name function. So this should be able to, every time we click this submit button, we change that first name. And then I'm going to explain something else to you that might be interesting about these on input things. So, test, submit. Oh, what happened here? Hold up, boy. Well, that was a bit embarrassing. I actually did forget something. So there's actually more work to be done on the side of wherever is going to make the actual call. So in the nav menu side, because here we need to actually subscribe to the event. So I completely forgot about that. My bad. Sorry about the interruption. So how do we do that? So the first thing we got to do is create our the event itself on this side. So on first name state change, completely forgot about this step. So this will now trigger the lifestyle component of state has changed. So if you don't know what these are, every component has not lifestyle, what lifestyle, life cycle methods that do something during the render process of that component. So this method basically tells the component that a state has changed, please re-render, essentially. And then there are other lifecycle methods that do other things or allow you to put certain logic depending on what state of the rendering it is in. But this is what we care about, and this is actually part of a lifecycle. I don't know if you can actually see this. If you hover over it, you see it says component base. That's because this is part of the actual component. So that's where I'm actually pulling this function from, the component. We're just creating this one so that this event triggers this. That's all that does. But when you do these when you try to subscribe them, you have to subscribe them on the uninitialize step. So we're gonna do that because you have to, in the beginning of the rendering, subscribe all your you have to subscribe the actual state management to whatever it is you're trying to use it in. So in this case, we're on the uninitialize step for this particular component. This is what it's called, profile state. Okay. Also, this is running. That's it's purple. So we are setting this event into our state change handler. So if you remember what we did here, we're gonna be invoking that essentially. So that's how that works. However, if you just do that without removing it at some point in time, you might cause a memory leak. So up here, you will need an iDisposable. And this basically means that we're gonna remove the subscription. Void iDisposable.disposable instead of plus equals, whatever that is, whatever I just wrote on first name state change, is gonna be minus equals on first name state change, because we got to remove this whole subscription. It has to stop listening at some point. And this will happen, I believe, at the end of the component. Whatever it does the whole resource thing. I don't know, like it's a whole thing, but it will. But what we want is to ensure that whenever we attach the subscription, we remove it, or else you might cause a memory leak at some point in time, and you don't want that. So now that that's done, the events should trigger as expected. Our page is now listening, or it's actually it is truly attached to a state management, and then once the state changes on the form state side, you will see it here that is trying to listen to the state management. So if I do it here, test, and submit, boom. So now we are able to both trigger an event from our form state component to the nav menu, essentially, because the nav menu is attached right now. It is listening to the state management, and then when we're done, the disposal will take over and then remove that for you when it has to. So I hope this taught you how to use the state management and state management, whatever the data is that it has in it, in other places of the code. Basically, it's similar to how React does it, where in the background, the process is essentially you have some state management that you have a state that you are listening to, and you have other things subscribed to that so that they have access to the data, and then at some point in time your data is going to do whatever it needs to do. So unfortunately, I didn't attach this is attached to the first name. So what I would need to do in order to ensure that when I do that movement, I don't lose that data, I would have to attach it to the uninitialized of that. But let me see. I can just do it. I'm gonna copy paste the one I have here. Let's see if I'm right. This is what I was talking about before about adding this to the on initialize step, and if it's not correct, then I'll figure it out and edit it here. There, see? I was correct. Haha, I wasn't sweating at all. But yeah, that's what I meant before where we want to add this to the on initialize step. So I guess we don't really need this here anymore. So you would have to do this extra step in order for you to make sure that you don't lose data on the actual component itself if you're doing it this way. On initialize, you call, you get whatever the data you want that you were saving, and then you attach this to some event like on click to set it, and then that setting part will actually have a state event in there that we are attaching to the other components that want to listen to us. And the way you do that is by attaching their state has changed to an event, and then that event attaches to ours so that we could trigger it. I wish I could draw it or whatever, but that's how it's kind of like a chain, basically. Yeah, the really layman's terms of trying to set this is that I have a state manager. You want to listen to it, you could subscribe to it to listen to it. And then I could also attach events to it if I want to, specifically the state has changed event. Once I do that, then I could trigger my own events and trigger the event that you need to trigger. The state has changed event in order for us to change the data when we need to. So that is the gist of it. I know it's a little confusing, but that's what's happening in the background. And this is how another way of using the state to use state management is by having other components listen in to the state manager or whatever it is that you're managing. I'm repeating it a lot, but yeah, this is how you do that. This is a more advanced way of doing it, but if you've been to React or Angular, this is very similar to how they do it. This is how Blazor does it without going to a third party. I might go into that if you want. You can go talk about Fluxor or something like that, so that if you are used to that way of doing what do you call it? If you're doing state management, then we could talk about that. But this is a very simple way of actually having other components subscribe to your state management. So that's all there is to it. Thank you very much. I'm very happy that we have reached near monetization. I've just applied for it because thanks to you guys, you've helped me reach the threshold and you have allowed me to actually apply for the monetization. I can't wait to make my $20 a month just like these other YouTubers at about my size. So, fantastic. No, but for real, I do appreciate everybody helping me out here. And don't worry, there'll be more videos to come. So I hope you enjoyed it. If it was a little confusing, yeah, it is kind of confusing when you think about it in the background. Like just hearing it myself is kind of but that's how it goes sometimes. But yeah, thank you very much. See ya.